Welcome to the inaugural episode of the 22 Booker podcast, brought to you by the team at 22 Booker Entertainment. I'm your host, Corlandos Scott, and today we're diving into the origins of our short film and 22 Booker's inaugural project, Morning. Joining me is Ryan Lipscomb, the writer and director behind Morning, where we discussed launching 22 Booker as a production company and why we decided now was the time for this project. What's up, Ryan?
How you doing, Dose?
Man, I'm good. I'm good. I see you repping Howard,
Yeah, man,
always.
got to, all day, every day.
Well, man, listen, I want to just jump straight into things, but before I do, tell me who is Ryan Lipscomb? Like, how did we get here to this moment where we're on the podcast talking about a short film in the first place?
Yeah, well, so I'm a writer and director. I born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. Obviously went to school at Howard University for undergrad, and then University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts for film school for my master's. And I've kind of come up basically working in writers' rooms primarily. So I've worked in the writers' room for Watchmen. I worked on Impeachment American Crime Story. I've worked on uh, Mrs. Davis, show for Peacock. Just finished up working on a Richard Pryor series with Kenya Barris. Kind of been in and around the business for about a decade now. Just kind of like working and trying to make projects and do creative work.
So you've been writing for years and years now, and this is one of the projects, Morning, that has this always been in kind of your view, or when did you conceive of what is now Morning?
So I've been for a number of years now trying to uh, get into directing. I've had a couple of different projects, feature projects, um, that I've almost been able to get going. Haven't been able to get going for one reason or another, financing for having fallen out, which happens a lot in the business. It's really hard to get independent projects off the ground. Um, especially in the last, few years, just with the nature of the business, right? So I had a couple projects, um, you know, that I've been working on that had been in development that tend to look like they were going to stall. Um, and around the time, I kind of just decided that I kind of wanted to go back to basics and just like instead of you know, going through like the normal mainstream apparatus of Hollywood, trying to get my own project off the ground, a short film, a little bit lower stakes, just so I can get back in the director's chair and do the thing that I love, which is working with actors and working with crews and you know uh, doing this cinematic medium, which I love so much. And so I decided to put something together on my own. And, for me, I started to like consider like what was on, my heart as an artist at the time. And so so like my father just passed away, I lost him about 2 years ago. And so I was in this mode where I was thinking a lot about, uh, grief and mourning and where I was in my life and um just my when that happens you're kind of in a mode of like reflection in terms of like you know what your life has been up to that point and then what your life is going forward. It's definitely like a resetting almost when you lose a parent. And so I decided to explore that. A lot of times in my work, I it is about a lot about like me being reflective about where I am in my life. A lot of times, friends of mine they'll read my work and they'll say, "Oh, well, this character is you, right?" And so and I always deny it, but obviously there's obviously like pieces of me and everything that I write, which is probably true for a lot of writers. And so anyway, so I decided to write this piece that uh, is essentially exploring the complexity of grief, and how it's not always sadness, and it's not linear, and it's like you feel a bunch of different conflicting emotions, and you have your family around you, you have your community around you, and there's these little inflections of joy. And so you know while like you're sad about the loss of somebody very close to you, there's also this thing that happens where uh, you're very grateful for a community that can then finally like comes around you and surrounds you and kind of lifts you up in a place at a time you really need them, right? And so that's really what I wanted to like explore uh, in this project, in this piece, was just that complexity. At the time, I had just seen Steve McQueen's Small Axe series on Amazon Prime. In particular, the one short film, Lovers Rock, and I was really inspired by that because it was this place, this house party is set in South London, in the early '80s, and you know, it was just it's like this house party where like it was just oasis of joy for all these young black people, and like they're in there, they're partying, they're having a good time, they're in a way protected from uh the racism that surrounds them, like the harshness of the world around them. But here in this place they were safe, and obviously there were little uh inflections of like trauma and danger and stuff like that within the confines of the party. But it was just these just inflections, and like the camera just kind of like floating around, and just kind of picking up all these different characters in this place. And so I was really inspired by that, and I wondered if there was a way for me to invert that idea, with what I was going through, right? And so uh, instead of taking a place of joy and inflecting it with these little places of like trauma and danger, I tried to take this place of mourning, and inflect it with uh, these little specks of joy and community and family, and see, and kind of like tell that story about how, even in a place of loss, like, there is still a lot of life. And so that was kind of just the impetus for the film. You know, I just, it really is just a matter of like, as an artist, you just want to get something made. And so this was on my heart. I was like, I need to make this.
So, and I don't think I've mentioned this, but so I'm one of the producers on the short film
Mm,
Morning. And when you came to me with this, it was a no-brainer for me. First of all, because we go way back, we've worked together on projects,
hmm
uh, years ago and over the years, but also because I lost my father a year or so before you went through losing your father. And so when I read the script, I was like, that's what I was feeling with the best. Like, no, oh, he gets it. Like he gets it. So it resonated with me, and I hadn't even seen the Small Axe series at that point yet, but it did really kind of peel back some of the layers of grief and help for me validate the thing that I was feeling, which was that it's not one dimensional. It's it's not linear. It's not even time bound. Like I there'll be
Correct.
things that I feel right now that I never felt in the moment, a few years ago when it happened,
hmm
and it'll bring up other stuff. So it's just a crazy mix of things. And the other thing that I liked about it was, of course, as a black man, as a black creative, it showed a story that was universal, but recognized that we live in that universality.
hmm
Whereas, naturally, a lot of stuff that I see now, it's the black story. Is this a black story? Like, well, it's a story. It's a human story. But to see it from my vantage point, told as a universal story, was one of the things that just drew me to it. And really, for me, that's what opened up the conversation with you about like, all right, I think there's something bigger here. I think there's something bigger than just a short film. What can we do to foster these kinds of stories? And I think that's when you really came up with the idea for 22 Booker. What was your thought process behind making it something more than just a a short film, making this more than just a one off?
Yeah, so as you know, Dose, like my whole kind of um philosophy for art and cinema and stuff like that is essentially like I can tell stories from my experience and my humanity and stuff like that, but my the wholeness of my of my humanity is not tied up in my blackness, right? Um, and the thing about that is like that's not me saying like trying to run away from my blackness at all. Like I love my blackness. I love who I am. I love my family. I love my friends, and of my experience and my history. Um, but the thing about it is my everyday as a human is not like, oh, I'm a black man in this world. Like that's just inherent, right? And so I think what a lot of like Hollywood sometimes forgets is that we are not just our everyday is not just tied up in like the kind of these racial traumas and racial dramas that we kind of like see all the time in Hollywood and stuff like that. It's more so like we can live on a human level, experience life just like everybody else. We have we feel anger, we feel happiness, we feel joy, we feel pain, we feel betrayal, we feel all these different emotions, and these are not inherent to just like black people or white people or anything like that, or Latino people or Asian people. Like these are universal stories. It's like this is our collective um our collective inheritance as people, as human beings, right? And
Yeah.
so for me, I just in the world I was coming from in terms of just like Hollywood, and trying to get stuff made and stuff like that. It had been really hard to try to get my stories told, just from a standpoint of like it had to be tied up in some kind of hook, right? Or like some way of trying to like explain the black experience in some way where I just wasn't really that interested in that. For me, it's inherent. It's the way I live my life. I live in it all the time. You know what I mean? And that's not something I need to explain to anybody, right? This is just me existing, right? And so, 22 Booker kind of came out of the idea of like I kind of got tired of like chasing Hollywood to try to get my stories told. I just wanted to like make my stuff and tell my stories on my own, and kind of like not be you know, handcuffed by gatekeepers, in Hollywood. I just want to kind of do it myself. I kind of came to that revelation, you know, uh just being in the business for however many years and kind of beating my head against the wall, trying to go through certain people to get stuff done, whether that be executives or agents or managers or anything like that. Like I just like this is kind of getting in the way of what I want to do. And so I kind of just decided that like, okay, let's just see, and it's gonna be hard, it's gonna be difficult. If it was easy, everybody would do it, but let's just see if we can get something done uh, on our own and make a project that we're proud of and find the money on our own and just do it. And then turn around and see if we can do it again, right? Uh, and so that's kind of where 22 Booker came out of. The name itself, and I think this is important. Whatever the name itself, came from my dad, who kind of encouraged me, no matter what, to like kind of keep going with business and kind of continue to chase this dream I had, right? And so, you know, uh, my parents are from Dallas, Texas, and so my dad played basketball and stuff like that in high school, was like a star basketball player, and so the name Tweety Baker comes from his jersey number. His jersey was number 22 on Booker T. Washington High School in Dallas, Texas. And that's where the name comes from, 22 Booker, kind of like a tribute to my dad. And so I kind of like take him with me uh, whenever we're talking about this project, whenever we're talking about how we're going to grow 22 Booker and see if we can expand and see if we can make more projects, make more films, and kind of tell stories that are important to us. And look, I'm not trying to say that like nobody else is doing that. Like I think there are a lot of people, great filmmakers doing a lot of really interesting, important work and stuff like that. But you know, for me and for the rest of us, it's like we want to tell our stories also. We want to continue to add to that conversation, and so that's what 22 Booker is about.
I think there was absolutely no pushback from the team about the name 22 Booker because it just resonated with all of us. Number one, with your dad being the inspiration behind this inaugural project, it seemed fitting. And then two, just kind of the themes and lessons that, we got from him through you about just, persevering, keeping pushing forward, not giving up on it. And so it was like, yeah, it's a no-brainer, 22 Booker for sure.
Hmm.
But you mentioned about the adding to the conversation. What do you think about the conversation right now? What do you think when people say, I want to add to the conversation, we want to, make sure our creativity is seen. What do you think that conversation is right now in Hollywood, especially around the indie world, around independent films and stuff that we're actually seeing make it to market in some shape, form, or fashion, whether that's a streamer or to the screen? What, where do you see that conversation is right now? And it's kind of a loaded question. I'll give you a little context on what I mean, because there's some conversations that people are having about how whack a lot of content we're seeing is,
Hmm.
and people for whatever reason they like to bash on the Tubi content and this and that, and then some people say that it's a glut of content on some of the streamers that nobody's ever getting to.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the conversation and adding your creative voice to the conversation, how do you break down and analyze what that conversation is right now?
So I think obviously Hollywood itself is in a state of change at the moment. It's trying to figure out what it's going to be going forward. And that conversation includes discussion about where the studios are right now. That conversation includes um, you know, streaming and what's profitable. That conversation includes obviously Netflix and YouTube and TikTok and all these different, like social media sites. That conversation includes AI, right? Um, and so, for me, there can be this sort of fatalistic attitude in Hollywood about about where the state of the business is going and where cinema is going. And for me, I uh, not that I ignore those concerns. I just think like for me as an artist, what else are we gonna do? I'm actually optimistic about where we can go going forward. And the reason I'm optimistic is because like we've been in these kind of like states of upheaval before in Hollywood where we're trying to figure out where things are gonna go. And we went through this in the 1960s. We went through this in the 1980s, whereas people were bemoaning the state of cinema and the state of art and like where the studios were at and like oh, this genre of movie is no longer making money, so therefore the business is going to collapse. And we've been through this before. Right? It's a cyclical.
Hollywood is always on fire. It's
Exactly.
always the industry is always on fire.
It's a cyclical thing. And but the thing about that is if you go back and you look at history, you know the the 1960s begat the boom of the 1970s and like the creatively rich cinema that we got from the 1970s, right? Like the 1980s begat the creatively rich 1990s with the boom of the independent cinema. You know what I mean? And to me, it just feels like a similar thing where you know uh, Hollywood is changing. We're trying to figure out what cinema is going to be, what streaming is going to be. Certain genres of films aren't as guaranteed box office as they used to be. The state of TV, people say, peak TV is over, you know what I mean? But like the thing about that though is that creates opportunity, right? And so we have all these great writers who came out of TV. Now, okay, maybe I'll turn my head and start looking at writing great films. The studios aren't as good a position they used to be. maybe this is the time for an independent studio to rise up, and for a new indie market to kind of grow out of that, right? Because artists are always going to create, that like that's one thing that will never change. That's why I'm not necessarily worried about AI, because from my standpoint, you know, uh, and I guess I'll just speak for myself. I'm not really interested in art created by a robot. I'm just not, you know. And for me, art, it comes from the human experience. It's about like, you know, uh, trying to tell whoever inherits this world how to survive it. Like that's the James Baldwin quote. You know what I mean? Like, um, that's what it is. It's human experience, right? And so, a robot, AI can mimic that. It can aggregate that, but it's not necessarily going to create anything like original, or complex, in that way. I mean, obviously these things are going to get better, but at the same time, I'm still going to gravitate more towards something someone created, a flesh and blood human created from the heart. You know what I mean? Just from their experience and like their emotions and their point of view. You know what I mean? And so I'm really bullish on what cinema can be in the next decade, in terms of just like what kind of projects can come out, the original, what kind of creativity and originality can be created, by artists just deciding like we're going to do this ourselves. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like the same, kind of my impetus for like trying to do this now is just like I think it's a really good time, to try to create things on your own, and kind of do things independently, and try to find the financing. No matter, it's always been hard to find money for cinema, but it's a good time to do that now because there's opportunity. And so that's just where I'm coming from in terms of like uh where I see the business going. I think we had a lot of like franchises and IP and stuff like that in the last decade. Uh and I think now is the time for original stories and more creativity, and a time for people to tell uh like more human stories and stuff like that. And so I just think it's a rich landscape now for this kind of thing that we're trying to do.
I think it's interesting that the political landscape of Hollywood, when you talk about the studios and what's profitable, what's not profitable, how decisions get made based on what's going to sell and what's not going to sell. I find it interesting that that whole landscape coincides with a time or a season that we're in where the barrier to entry to say I'm a filmmaker is so low. And I'm gonna be
Hmm.
honest with you, I think that that presents pros and cons.
Hmm.
I mean, the pros are there's never been a better time to be able to grab a camera and tell your story.
Hmm.
Like who's going to stop you? It doesn't even take like we're not shooting on film anymore, so the expense has gone down dramatically. I mean, all equipment, expendables, everything is cheaper now than it ever has been, and more people have access to filmmaking equipment. Then the con is more people have access to filmmaking equipment. Like, I mean, there are legitimate like projects that have been shot on an iPhone.
Yeah.
Like, as far as like the visual aesthetics and the craft and the craftsmanship behind the project. But
Hmm.
then everybody has a cell phone and everybody thinks they can replicate that. And so how do you not get lost? How does your voice or how does your project or creativity not get lost in this ocean of noise that kind of has risen because everybody can do it or everybody thinks they can do it?
I think at the end of the day, people with a rich perspective, a rich point of view, people who really put time and effort into their craft, people are able to collaborate, people who are able to be resourceful. At the end of the day, uh, quality wins. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that there's not a place for everything. I think there is a place for everything. You know what I mean? Like I find many an Instagram or TikTok video hilarious. You know what I'm saying? That's not to say that there's no place for content creators and stuff like that. But for what I'm trying to do and what other filmmakers are trying to do, like, there's a certain craft, there's a certain like know-how, there's a certain level of effort and planning that goes into the kind of stuff that we're trying to do, right? And kind
Right.
of push cinema as a visual medium, as a storytelling medium, right? And so, what we're trying to do is just different than what the goals of other people are trying to do, and that's okay. You know what I mean? Both things are valid, and both things, deserve to be out there. You know what I mean? Um, and so, like for us, like when we create Morning, when we create the other projects that we're like thinking about trying to put together, is like we're trying to add to a cinematic legacy, and we're trying to put a certain level of craft, a certain level of artistry into what we're trying to do, and we're trying to push ourselves to see what is possible for us to do. You know what I mean? And so for me, I don't really necessarily worry about my voice kind of standing above the noise and stuff like that, mainly because I can't. That's not something I can control. All I can control is what I can control as an artist, and like putting in the work, putting in the effort, getting the right team around me, collaborating with them, using their expertise, using their know-how, and so to collectively we're kind of pushing this boulder up the hill. And so at the end of the day, once we do that, and then once we try to get it out there, once we try to like promote it and market what we're trying to do, uh, all we can only control what we can control, right? And so you know that's kind of my thing, is kind of keeping the main thing, right? Which is uh hopefully there's an audience for what we're doing. Hopefully people are able to find it. Hopefully people care,
Yeah.
um but as an artist, like I gotta worry about it somewhat because filmmaking is expensive and we got to get a return at some point, right? But at the same, and also we do it so people can see what we do. Well, that's the whole point, right? But you know, you can only worry about that so much. You know what I mean? We worry about the audience. We want to have as big an audience as possible, but at the end of the day, we do as much work as we can to create the circumstances for us to have as big an audience as we can. Um, and then we just kind of let the chips fall where they may.
So about Morning, you mentioned a bit about what the film explores, some of the themes and whatnot, and how that tied into you. Can you give us like a log line, so to speak, or just like a synopsis of the film in the capsule?
So the film basically takes place entirely at uh, the repast and the immediate aftermath of the funeral. And so it surrounds the Butler family, in particular, Noah Butler, who is the adult son of the patriarch who has died. And so he is uh, grappling with all his emotions, his grief and stuff like that. In the company of his friends and family, his mother, who's obviously just been widowed, and his older sister, Sherry. Uh, and as they're grappling with this, their Noah and Sherry's estranged uncle, their father's brother, who they haven't seen in years, shows up at the repast after um, not having shown up at the funeral. And there's
Why
obviously,
we like that? Why are we like that?
I mean, look, family dynamics are complicated. People are complicated. That's all I can say about that. Um, but this uncle's arrival, after years of being away, after being estranged from his brother, Noah's father, it brings up a lot of different emotions in the family. Um, you know, uh, the fraying of familial bonds. It brings up past history. It brings up a lot of different things. Noah in particular, who's harboring a lot of like anger, interior anger, suddenly finds like an outlet for his ire. And so, all these different things are kind of like tied up into this film, into this particular moment for these characters. And it said it deals a lot with grief. It deals about a lot with the complexity of that, the non-linear way that affects us. As you said, grief is tricky. It sneaks up on you in the weirdest times. You know what I mean? You could be doing something entirely unrelated, and suddenly one little thing suddenly triggers you. You know what I mean?
Let me
And
ask
so,
you this.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Do you at all, does your voice tone and inflection and tenor, does it all at all sound like your father's?
Oh, nobody's ever asked me that before. um,
Here's the reason why I asked you that,
right.
because you just mentioned something like how it sneaks up on you at times. It's
Mhm,
weird. I'll do something, hand on the Bible. I will like cough a certain way
mhm,
or clear my throat a certain way. And it in that moment it hits me like, dang, I sounded just like my dad. Like it's the weirdest thing. Or I'll say a word or something or a phrase, or I'll hear myself on video or something, and I'll be like, man, like that was him. That was him, and
mhm.
that's a freaky thing too.
Yeah,
And I mean it's no big mystery. It's genetics. I mean, he's my father.
right.
But it's just weird how you said how sometimes it sneaks up on you, and in those moments, that's something that's happened to me several times in my adult life since his passing. That it's just been a really weird thing to hear him in me, just
Hmm.
vocally, tonally, and it takes me right back you know to the moment. So I was just curious, man, just from one guy to another.
It's a strange thing. Like I think obviously you you lose a parent like that, you take stock of yourself uh in the face of that. You're asking yourself like how much of them are you carrying with you, the good parts and the bad parts, right? Like those things, are inherently things you think about, right? I know for me, like I was like thinking about the idea of like, my dad passed when I was 36 years old. But I was also thinking about the fact that like he had me when he was 36 years old, right? And how like I was literally at the halfway point. He passed away at 72, but I was at the halfway point of his life. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
And I was comparing where I was in my life at that point, where he was in his life at the same point, right? And so that was the thing that I was grappling with a lot in the days since. I've noticed, little things, mannerisms that I have that reflect my father. I've noticed that, for sure. Not to step on the film or spoil. There's a moment uh in the film in Morning, where Noah is in the bathroom, whatever, and he stops and looks in the mirror, and he's looking in the mirror, and he's looking for traces of his father in himself, right? And so, like obviously these are things that we think about, when we lose a parent, especially one that we're particularly close with, right? Um, and that's a weird complex idea of grief, whatever. Like you are taking stock of, you know, especially like you think about like the sacrifices your parents made for you, right? You're
mhm.
taking stock of like, did I earn it? You know what I mean? Like those things you're grappling with, right? And so it's a very very strange thing to go through, and I don't think people really understand it. Just honestly, sometimes like how lonely it is, even if when you're surrounded by people, until you're going through it. You know what I mean? You don't ever really like get over or get past it. You learn how to live with it, right? The loss, the grief never goes away, but it gets smaller, right? Um, and so like that's the thing. Like further along, you kind of adjust to your new reality. It is essentially like a rebirth when that happens, right? Like you're one person before it happens, you're a different person after. And so yeah, I mean that's a real thing. You know what I mean? Just like think stuff like how much uh of uh how much of your father are you? You know what I mean? And then I know you have two young children, whatever. Like, but like then you think like how much of my father and my is in my children. You know what I mean? Or my kids. You know what I'm saying? Like how much
Yeah,
is legacy, right?
yeah.
You know, um, and that's a real thing to grapple with. You know what I'm saying? Like, so yeah.
And that's why I'm excited about the film, man. I can't wait for people to see this thing that that started with you and has blossomed into something that so many people have jumped on board to help bring into existence. So where are we right now in the filmmaking process? Where can people find out more? How can people get involved if they want to get involved?
So we'll probably link to it under this when we post this, but like we'll have an Indiegogo people can donate to. We'll have obviously an email address where you can contact us. You know what I mean? There'll be several ways for you to help, for you to donate that will kind of unveil in the days and weeks going forward. And where we are in the process is like we're getting ready to start pre-production. We're still in the fundraising stage. We're still, we're getting a great cast in place. Like we're doing the thing, right? Like the mantra has been, the movie is getting made, and that's what it is. There is no there's no scenario where that doesn't happen. So our goal is to make the best film that we possibly can, and we're trying to do everything in our power to make that happen. Through planning, through time, through effort, sweat equity, blood, sweat, and tears, what have you. We're kind of doing it, try to get this done. Like we've been planning this for over a year, to put this together. And so we're really at least I am. I can't speak for you, Dose, and I can't speak for other collaborators, whatever. But I'm really excited about where this is going, where this is going to end up, and the film we're going to end up with.
Now you can speak for me, man. That's exactly what I'm feeling.
Mhm.
This is going to be an amazing project. So, if you've enjoyed today, follow along with us. Like you said, we're going to link to all the ways you can get involved with this. Just following us on socials, donating to the cause, reaching out to us, connecting with us. You'll have all that information. So just check out any of the links and any of the information we put with this interview. And this is not all. Like we're coming back and we're doing this again, right, Ryan?
Yes, we're gonna have several different episodes, just talking about the genesis of the project. We're gonna bring some of our collaborators on. We're gonna talk about this from a few different angles. Just to really kind of deep dive into what this project is and what our progress is, and how we're thinking about this film from all different avenues. So stay tuned.
Absolutely. Keep rocking with us. Subscribe to us wherever podcasts are subscribable in your world, whether that's Apple, Spotify, whatever. Make sure you follow along with us and stay tuned for the next episode.
Thanks, Dose.